Okay. We're learning the Gemara in Daf Pei Aleph Amud Beis 81-2, the third Mishnah on the page. Yes, this is the third Mishnah. Let me let Ariel Green know that we started. Hold on. Okay. So the Mishnah, this is going to be a complicated sugya. We're going to learn now a complicated concept, the laws of the Zealot, and the story of Pinchas. We all know the story of Pinchas. We'll get there in a second. So the Mishnah says like this: a goynefes a kisva, someone who steals a kisva. We'll see what a kisva is in a second. It's a small article in the Beis Hamikdash, so you could pocket it. So you're stealing something that belongs to the temple. A makal b'koisim, someone who curses someone else or curses, God forbid, the creator with using an idol. V'haboil ramis, a person who has relations with a idol worshiper, meaning a Gentile. So kanoim poigin boy, so zealots take action. They're poigin boy. Rashi says as if they have to. We're going to learn Rashi in a second. What it defines as a zealot is poigin takes action, but the actual translation that they give in the English for poigin boy is that kill him. Okay, not just use the word killing, but poigin boy means also they have to meet him on and the action. Okay, kohen sheshimish betuma, a kohen, a priest that who serves in the temple while he is impure, knowingly, obviously, and doesn't care. In theory, they should take him to Bezdin to get punished, but they don't. The young zealot kohanim, say they take him chutz lazara outside of the sanctuary. They basically beat him to death. Begzirin zar, begzirin with poles, with sticks. Zor. What about not a kohen, but a foreigner, meaning a non-kohen? Sheshimish b'migdash, that serves in the temple, and he shouldn't. So what is the punishment? Rabbi Kiva Omer b'chenek. Rabbi Kiva says that a non-kohen that serves in the Beis Hamikdash is punishable by choking, means he gets put to death by the Bezdin. And the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Kiva, and they say it's b'dei shemayim. It's a punishment for that God punishes. Like this week's parsha, right? Nadav and Avihu. We learned this week's parsha. Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aaron, did a sacrifice that was foreign. They weren't supposed to do it, and they were punished by God. Okay. Now the Gemara says. Let's just do the Rashi because some Rashis that are important. The Rashi says, what is an Aramis? An Aramis, Rashi says, what kind of woman is that? Bas Oivit Kechavim, the daughter of an idol worshiper. So if a person has relations with the daughter of an idol worshiper, so kanoim poigim boy. So then the zealots will kill the person. So now Rashi says, you have to define a zealot. So Rashi says like this: Bnei Adam kasherim. First of all, they have to be kosher people. Meaning, what's kasher means that they themselves are righteous. Hamakanin kinasi shalamakim. That they're zealots. They're so to say they're jealous of they're taking on the jealousy of the makom, meaning God. They could only kill the person at the time of action. It means they don't hunt someone down who slept with a non-Jewish or a daughter of an idol worshiper. Only while the action's happening, and we'll see exactly. The Gemara goes into details. But afterwards, right after the action, no one, not Bezdin, no one. It's not an act punishable by death. So even Bezdin won't put that person to death. This is a law Moses brought down from Sinai, which is that at the time of action, if a person is having publicly, obviously because it's some other people are watching, relationships, like the story of Pinchas and Zimri, we're going to learn, went and took the non-Jewish woman, and in front of everyone, in front of Moshe, went and had relations with her. So then only at time of action, and mamish, while they're still in the middle of intercourse, are you allowed to attack and kill him? So Rashi just says the word poigim means upagabai. Yes, mimisin means poigim. Rashi says means to kill them. Okay, let's go back to the Talmud, to the Gemara, to the text. My kisva. What is a kisva that he steals? The person steals from in the temple. So if a person steals in the temple a kisva, So also there, all three cases. There's three cases that zealots take action. One is if someone steals an article from the temple. Another one is if someone curses the creator, and the third one if someone has relations with the daughter of an idol worshiper. So the Gemara says, what is a kisva that the person stole? Rav Yehuda says klisharis. It's a part of the temple. So it says, what's the proof? Because it says like this. See how you pronounce that? Hold on, the wrong page. It says and the shelving tubes. So the shelving tubes is a small tube, gold tube. So the small tube can be that if it's taken, we see that's what a kisva is. That it's a small tube of the temple. So he says, the Gemara says, Vehecha remiza, and where is there a hint in the Talmud that a hint in the Torah that you could kill someone for stealing a small article of the temple? It says V'layavai lirais kivla el hakodesh umeisu. So this verse is a pasuk that's talking about the Levites, that when the Kohanim were getting the temple or the tabernacle ready for movement, so they would cover the tabernacle and they would cover them with sheets. Only after they covered them with sheets, with coverings, with curtains, were the Levites to come in and then move it. But if they came in, it says, so the verse says that they shouldn't come to see kivla as a kodesh. When it's being covered, they shouldn't come to see. If they see it, then they're going to be killed. That means the Levites will be they're not allowed, they're going in too early into the sanctuary. So the Gemara wants to use the word kivla, also means to swallow up. If a person swallows up a hint, someone swallows up something from the holiness, like you put it in your pocket, right? So then you're going to die, even though it's not a verse talking about this case. But it's just a hint. The remez means a hint that the zealot could take action. Like Rashi says that's kivlas hakodesh lashon ganev shemavlimam umachviin, that it's swallowed and hidden. Rashi says remez ba'omuhu, that this is just a hint. It's not what the pasuk's talking about, because the pasuk's really talking about Levites. That they've been warned that when it comes to move the travels of the Mishkan, when the vessels of the temple, the inner temple, gets put into their coverings, that Aaron and his sons would cover the ark and the altars. So, and then only the Levites would come in and move it. That Aaron would come in when they traveled, and he would get the parts of the temple ready to be moved. But the Levites themselves could not come in and see it, because it's too far in for them to go see until the articles of the temple have been covered. For instance, the ark are moved by the Levites, but the Levites can't come into the Holy of Holies to see the ark until the Kohanim completed covering it. If they do, they get punished by death. So the idea of covering means kivlad, like it's covered, it's hidden. So from this we have a remez, a hint that if someone tries to hide something from the temple privately and steal it, it could be a Kohen, it could be anyone, whoever gets access to it. So then they get punished not by death by the Bezdin, but they get put to death by the zealots. Okay, next case. Amakal b'koisim, someone who curses with an idol. So the Gemara says like this: we have two opinions of what does it mean. Tani Rabbi Yosef says Yaka koisim es koismai. That the first understanding of what does it mean to curse with a idol is, for instance, if someone says, smite the one who endowed it with supernatural power, meaning that God that gave power to the idol, so the one who got the power should smite the person, the power that was given to it. Meaning to say that the person saying as if chas v'shalom, God forbid, that the idol should, damage the creator, God. The Rabbanan says no. The rabbis say that's also if someone comes and says curses another individual with an idol. If someone curses another individual with an idol, Amre, Yakau Koisim Loi V'Lekoinev, that a person who says that let the supernal force, meaning the idol, smite his the person and his creator and his provider. So the either one, according to those different opinions, if you're using an idol to curse someone, so the idea of associating an idol with such a thing, a zealot would come in and kill the person. Okay. Now the question is, and there's an argument. I'm not going to go into all the laws. There's a lot of laws over here because the question is, we said Rashi said that it only could kill, for instance, the third one, which we're going to learn now, is the person who has relations with a non-Jewish woman. So the person who has a relationship with a non-Jewish woman, there clearly the law is, like we're going to see now, only at the moment of intercourse. But however, what about in a case with the cursing or the stealing? The stealing, when the person steals, he or she puts it in their pocket and walks out. At what point could you take action? Or the same thing with the cursing. It's only when the person's uttering the curse or afterwards. So there's an argument of the commentaries. I think Rashi holds that all three of them has to be only in the time of action, if I'm not mistaken. Hold on. Yeah, in the second, yeah, okay. All right, so the first opinion is that he's cursing God directly with the idol. The second one is he's cursing another person with an idol and cursing God while he curses out the other person. Okay. Now's the third case. Habayel Aramis. We're going to turn the page soon. Someone who has relations with, Rashi says, the daughter of an idol worshiper. Rav Kahana asked the question of Rav, top of page 82A1 in the art scroll. What's the law if there's no zealots, right? Someone has relations with a non-Jewish woman and there's no zealot. Not every time is it a zealot. So what is the punishment? Like Rashi says, what is the punishment in such a case? Hold on, let me just update my commentaries here. What is the punishment in such a case? So it says, Anshe Rav Ligamre. Rav forgot, Anshia Rav, Inshie Rav Ligmore. So Rav forgot the law. What happens? Iklu Rav Kahana B'chalme. So Rav Kahana had a dream, and in the dream, he sees a verse. So the verse is going to give him insight to answer the law. So what was the verse that he sees? The verse says, Bagda Yehuda. Yehuda was a boygid. The boygid is a traitor. V'toyeva nesasa b'Yisrael, and an abomination was done within Israel, u'b'Yishalayim, and in the city of Jerusalem. Kichil Yehuda kodesh Hashem, because Judah profound the sanctification of God. Asher oyav, right? The holiness of God that he has loved. And it says, what did he do? Boil bas el nacher, and he had relations, or he married the daughter of an alien god. Okay, so that's the verse that he sees in his dream. And the verse he sees or he hears in his dream is that Bagdi Yehuda, is referring to the Jewish people, Judah, was a traitor. They did an abomination in Israel and Jerusalem. They desecrated Hashem's name, and they had relations or married a non-Jewish woman. So he came to Rav, his colleague or his teacher, and he told him, this is what I've seen in my dream, this verse. So when he told over this verse, so Atkirei Rav the Gemara, so then Rav he remembered what the law was. So how does he understand this verse? The verse is referring to different sins that the Jewish people did, and we're going to learn the punishments for them. Bagda Yehuda, what does it mean that the Jewish people were traitors? How you were a traitor to God? This is talking about the time of the first temple at the end, when everything was going chaotic. That the Jewish people were serving idols. That's a traitor instead of serving God. And then it says, Bagdasam ki beis Yisrael ne'um Hashem. So we see also it says a verse that says that the Jewish people were traitors. An abomination was done in Israel and Jerusalem. So what sin is that referring to? Zeh mishkav zachar, that it was homosexual acts that were happening. So that the prophet is saying that the Jewish people were behaving and were having homosexual relationships. And how do we know that that's what the verse is referring to? So the word to'eva, which means an abomination, we find when it talks about the laws of prohibiting homosexual acts. A person should not, another male should not sleep with another man. Mishkave isha, this the way one sleeps with a woman. To'eva, it's an abomination. Okay, so that's the second thing that the prophet was referring to. What's the third thing? Kichila al Yehuda Kodesh Hashem. The Jewish people did a chilul; they were desecrated the sanctification of God. Zu Zaina. This is people that were either having relations or the girls themselves that were behaving like prostitutes. Like it says, Lo yeh kodesh. One should not be a kodesh. Kodesh means both a male or kadesha is a female prostitute. So the Jewish people were either the boys and girls who were prostituting themselves out, or people were sleeping with prostitutes. Either one, that's part of the verse is talking about. The third one, ubal bas el noicher, that they had relations with the daughter of a foreign guard. So what is this? Zeh haka'aba al kusis. This is a person who has relations with a non-Jew. Jewish woman means, what's the difference between a zona, a prostitute, and a kusis? That a zona is a Jewish girl that's prostituting herself out. So even if so that was another sin. So it's not necessarily something that's connected to a specifically to Gentile woman. And aside for that, they were having relations or marrying Gentile women. We'll see. Marriage is not so simple because a Jewish man halachically cannot marry a female woman. It's not considered marriage. Okay. Ubal bas el neicher is abal lakusis. Because of Astray, and the verse says afterwards, so we're still trying to figure out what's the law. If someone has relations with a Gentile woman or the daughter of an idol worshiper, however you want to learn it, what's the punishment if the Zealot is not there? So because of Asrei, Yachris Hashem l'isha sheyasena er va'oina. So God should cut down Yachris, like cut off this person. It says, the verse says that Yachris Hashem l'isha sheyasena er va'oina me'ole Yaakov. May God cut off the man who does this, and it says and cut him off from the house, from the tent of Jacob. For he offers a mincha offering to the Lord of hosts. What does this mean? So he says like this: Im Talmud Chacham hu, if the person is, hold on a second. If the person is a Talmud Chacham, meaning a Torah scholar, and he's sleeping with non-Jewish women, lo yeh lo er b'chacham. He will not have a son who's going to be learned. He's going to be able to have discussions in Torah. V'oina b'talmidim, or is qualified to answer the questions of the disciples. So he won't have colleagues of learning, and he won't be a teacher to teach. If he has relations, if the father had relations with a non-Jewish woman. We're not talking about a child even from this marriage. We're talking about his maybe children from his Jewish wife. Im kohenhu, if he's a kohen, he will not be privileged to have a son that is offering sacrifices, minchas, the mincha sacrifice to God. So basically, from this we see that Rav says that the punishment is going to be in your children. A person who has relations with a non-Jewish woman and there's no zealot to jump in and take action. So the punishment is going to be that it's going to affect your children. They're not going to be Torah scholars, and they're not going to be Aaron, and they're not going. And if they're Kohen, they're not going to be able to serve in the temple. Go ahead, Aaron. What's your question?
Is the punishment any worse? Say the woman is an idol worshiper and a prostitute at the same time, and a non-Jew.
I don't believe so, because no, I don't. I think the Torah doesn't. I don't want to get too specific, but the Torah basically doesn't really differentiate between the two. if you know what I mean. Reb Chia bar Avoya. Reb Chia, the son of Avoya, says, so like this. He's going to say a story. He himself was the grandfather of Reb Preda. This is a very famous Gemara. So Reb Chia, the son of Avoya, said like this, that Kol habala kusis, whoever has relations with a Gentile woman, as if he marries an idol. That he has relations with the daughter of a foreign god. Is a person having relations with a daughter of an idol? There's no daughter of an idol. This means a person who has relations with any Gentile woman is as if he's having relations with a idol. Okay, that's the first thing Reb Chia bar Avo says. The second thing Reb Chia bar Avo says like this: I'm Reb Chia bar Avo. Kasiv al galgusei shel Yehokim, on the skull of Yehokim, it was carved out. Doesn't say how it was carved out. Could be by God or could be by someone. That now, I'll tell you who Yehokim was in a second. So it says Zois v'oid acheres. This and still another. It's a coded crypto message. This comma and still another. Who is Yehokim? Yehokim was the second to last king of Judah. He was the son of Yeshio. He was the son of Yehoshio. And what happened? Yoshio was the last official righteous king in Judah. So basically, Yeshio was the one that his last descendants, children and grandchildren, depending, he had different that the last 20-something years of the first temple went in spiraled by his kingdom already. He was killed. He was killed by the Egyptians. Paro Nechei, Paro, the limping Paro, wanted to attack. They were going to go into war with Babylonia, and Yeshayahu got involved. They wanted, obviously, for Egypt to go to Iraq, which is where Babel is. They have to pass through Israel, right? Israel is the connection between North Africa and the Middle East. So they wanted to pass through peacefully through Eretz Yisrael. And Yeshayahu was a righteous king, and he was friends with Yirmiyahu. He tried to do the good things. He was already told in his lifetime that the temple would be destroyed in the prophecy. But he was told by Jeremiah that it wouldn't happen in his lifetime, but it would happen, that there's going to be a destruction of the temple, not in his lifetime. He was a righteous king, the last righteous king. Even though Tzidkiyahu wasn't a bad king, what Tzidkiyahu means he was the final king, but he's not, Judah was in a bad place at the end. But after so many good and bad kings, it already hit the point that even though Yeshayahu was a good king, it was over. And so, it's like the party's over, but, we're going to have one last drink. And Yeshayahu, he's the one who hid the ark. So what happened was, there's a verse that says in the Torah, that not only is Israel going to be peaceful, meaning Israel, the Jewish people are going to have peace, Eretz Yisrael, but you won't even allow a peaceful armory of an army to go through your land. It means that you're going to be so strong that God told the Jewish people, you're going to be so strong that even a peace force, right? The UN peace force, no one's coming into Eretz Yisrael. So Yeshayahu said, he learned that verse, and he said that I'm not allowing Paro to go through Eretz Yisrael. Not even though he's not looking to hurt me, he just wants to pass through me. But it says so he didn't let Paro go through, which was a bad move. The prophet told him, this verse in the Torah is talking about when the Jewish people are behaving. You're in no position to stand up to the king of Egypt. And the king of Egypt came in the war. Yeshayahu went out to fight him, and they shot who knows how many bows of arrows into him. He died, and at the end he said God was right. The famous thing that he was muttering before he passed away, that the famous verse, I forget what it was, he was saying, Tzadik Hashem b'chol derachav, I think it was, God is righteous. But basically, after he was killed, the four kings afterwards were Yechaniah, Achaz, Yayakim, and Tzidkiyahu. Yayakim was a horrible king. He was like the Caligula of the Jewish kings. Really, he did anything you could do in idol worship, in an abomination. He was involved in all kind of horrible things. God said a prophecy about him that he's going to be put to death. He's going to be killed, and he's not going to even get a Jewish burial. So on his skull, they found his skull was carved in Zeus v'oid. So this is going to happen. What the prophet says is going to happen to you is going to happen, and even more. And he's going to be hung outside of Jerusalem, all that. That's what happened. They came in, the Babylonians came and they took him captive, and he died on the way. And he never got a Jewish burial. God says he's going to be buried like a donkey, which doesn't get buried. Okay. So now back to the Talmud. So Reb Chia bar Avo says, it was engraved in the skull of Yehokim, Zeus. What the verse says is going to happen to him, that he's going to have a burial of a donkey that dies on the road, right? No one's going to go bury a donkey on the road. In those days, if your donkey dies on the road, you push it to the side and you move on. So Yehokim didn't get even a burial. Forget a Jewish burial. He didn't get a burial. But it says va'oid and something else. What's va'oid? Something else is going to happen. We don't know. So now the Gemara is going to tell us. So Ziknei de Rab Preda, for some reason Rashi says that the grandfather of Rab Preda was the same person who's telling the story, Reb Chia bar Avo. I'm not sure why they would refer to him as the grandfather of Rab Preda if he's telling the story. So it says like this, that what happened, like Rashi says, Ziknei de Rab Preda, hu Reb Chia bar Avo. He's himself, that's what the Gemara says in Chelik. Ashkach ahu galgusa, he found the skull of Yehokim. The Havashadi B'Shar Yerushalayim, that was like the first verse. The God said that through the prophet that his body is going to be, his corpse is going to be hung out like a dead donkey on the gates of Jerusalem. And he found, Repreda must have lived 500 years later. He found the skull of Yehokim by the gates of Jerusalem. And inside the skull was engraved, Zeus v'Oid. This, meaning that he's not going to get a Jewish burial, and something else to come. But what happened was he didn't feel right about that. I mean, the grandfather of Reb Preda, Reb Chia, didn't feel right. He was a king and all that. So Kavra, he buried the skull, and every time he buried the skull, Vahader Navug, it just came out of the ground again. It wouldn't stay in the ground. He tried it because God said through Jeremiah, he's not going to get a burial. So even though Reb Preda was a righteous person who was trying to bury the skull, it kept on coming out. So cover of Navag, he kept on, he buried it and it reappeared, and he buried it and it reappeared. Amar Haiga Gusa Shal Yehokim. So right away the Reb Preda realized that this is the skull of Yehokim, the king, the horrible king. That the verse says that he's going to get the Kfuras Chamor Yikavar, he's going to get the burial of a dead donkey. Shall be buried, dragged and cast beyond the gates of Jerusalem. So, but nevertheless, the grandfather of Preda said, Amar Malkahu, he's a king. It's not proper conduct to disgrace him like this, that his skull should just be lying on the floor. So what does he do? So he says, Shakla krachar b'sha'arei v'oisvei. He realized b'sifta. He took Yehoakim's skull and wrapped it in a silk and placed it in a box. So he realized he couldn't bury it because every time he buried it, it reappeared. So he figured he'd at least put it in a respectful place. So he covered it in a silk cloth and put it in a box, and put it in his garage, put it in his storage. And he brought it to his house. Later, his wife came and saw the skull. So imagine his wife comes home and she's going through his box, and she sees that wrapped in a nice silk cloth is the skull of something. She doesn't know what the skull is. And she sees a skull that her husband is has this walking around with this skull that's wrapped in silk. Imagine she wasn't too excited about that. So Nafka Amrluhu Lishivafta. She went and told her neighbor, right? What do you do when you don't know what your husband's doing? You talk to your friends, ask them what's my husband up to? Why does he have a skull wrapped in silk in a box in our house? So the very wise neighbor, always looking to make trouble. Amrle, so she tells her, you don't know who that skull is. Says, surely this is the skull of his first wife. Evidently, the grandfather of Preda was married before. So, and this is his second wife. So imagine his second wife comes home, sees him holding, keeping in a box and in a silk cloth a skull. So she goes to her friend, her neighbor, and her neighbor says, "What do you think? It's probably the skull of surely the skull of his first wife, and he's not over her yet. So in order to stay close to her, he's keeping his first wife's skull in the house in a box." So obviously she wasn't too excited about that his wife, that he's still kind of attached to his first wife. So what does she do? Tanura. She heated up the oven. And she put the skull in the oven and burnt the skull. So she was like, she thought she's going to burn Reb Freida's first wife's skull. Kiasa, when Reb Chia, who's the grandfather of Reb Freida, comes home and he sees, then he sees what his wife did. Now he realized, this is what it means, so basically, that's why whoever engraved it into the skull, this was a punishment by God. God said to Yehoiakim, you're going to be thrown out like a donkey, and then something else is going to happen. What was the something else? The something else that's going to happen was that the wife of Reb Freida's grandmother, the wife of Reb Freida's grandfather, burnt the skull. And so that was his second punishment. And not only did he not get burial, but it was cremated. Okay, so that's just a story. But that's a famous story of what happened to Yehoiakim, the king of Judah. He was a horrible person. I mean, he tried to do everything. He says that he came to sleep with his own mother, and his mother says his mother was a righteous queen from Yeshia's wife. He says, "Who does that?" She says, "I have no desire for you. I just want to upset God." He was a person who was looking to upset God. Okay. Ki asa Rav Dimi Omar. Rav Dimi said like this. So in the second temple, that was the end of the first temple. So after that, of course, we have the Tzidkiyahu is the final king. He's a king for 12 years, and he has at the end of his kingdom, Nebuchadnezzar comes and destroys Jerusalem, takes the remaining Jews, because it was his first exile with Yechaniah, takes the remaining Jews and brings them into exile, and most of the remaining Jews, besides those that were left in Eretz Yisrael, and obviously the horrible death that happens to Tzidkiyahu and then Yechaniah. So then after all that, of course, the Jewish people come back. The story of Purim happens, the Jewish people come back, and then comes 100 or so years later, the story of Hanukkah. Who's the savior of the story of Hanukkah? This time, not Mordechai and Esther, but Matisyahu and his sons and the Maccabees, which are the family of the Chashmonom. The Chashmonom were a kingdom for 100 plus years until Herod came, which was a servant of one of the final king of the Chashmonoim household. He kills the entire family of the Chashmonoim, and him and his descendants become king until this destruction of the second temple. So that's all a period of 500 years, right? 570 years after 500 so years. So here, when the Chashmonoim were in charge, they ruled Israel. And part of ruling Israel, it wasn't just in national issues, but also in Jewish issues. So it says like this: the Beis Din of the Chashmonoim made a gzeira. And what was their gzeira? They said like this: that means this is a famous Gemara. What is the prohibition of having relations with a non-Jewish woman? What is the violation? What is happening over here? So for instance, if a person has relations with a Jewish woman who hasn't gone to the mikveh to purify herself, that means he's having relations with a nida, with a woman who's a nida, who's hasn't yet purified herself from her cycle. So, but a Gentile woman, what kind of law does she have if you have relations? So the obviously for reasons, the Beis Din of the Chashmonom made special decrees to make it more severe than initially for having relations with non-Jewish women. So what did they say? So Beis Din Shel Chashmonaim Gazru, the court of the Chashmonaim made a gezerah like this: that Abal Akus is a person who has relations with a non-Jewish woman, Chayv Alo Mishum Niska or Nishka. What does Nishka mean? Kiasa Nishka stands for that it is or Nishka, and Rav Avin says it's Nishgaz. What is the difference? Nishka is like this. Nishka the nun stands for she has the law of a nida, of a woman who is impure from her cycle. The other thing is it says that she is a shin stands for she has the law of a shivcha. A shivcha means a maidservant. Third, that she's a Goya, a non-Jewish woman. And Aleph is, they added that also Ishus, that as if she's a married woman. So they made it more severe. Rav Avin says for Nishgaz. Nishgaz is for Nida, for a woman in her cycle, for Shivcha, she's like a maidservant, a Goya, she's a Gentile, and a Zoina as if he has relations with a prostitute. Avim Mishum, this is going back to Aaron's question. Avim Mishum Ishus Lesloi, but you can't say that as if she's married, since you can't really consider a Gentile woman married. This is a complicated idea. Meaning, basically, just to say quickly, and I don't want to get too details into this, but basically, first of all, what the courts of the Hashmonaim were doing was they took a relationship with a non-Jewish woman and made it more severe, as if you're having relations with a woman who's a nida, even though she doesn't have the laws of a nida, as if she's a shifcha, as if she's a maidservant, she's a goya, as she is, she's a married woman. So the other opinion says she can't be like a married woman, because to Jewish people, a Gentile woman is not considered married, but she could be considered, like Aaron now, she can be considered a prostitute. But basically what the Hashmonaim were trying to do were discourage. You have to remember, the Hashmonaim came after the Greeks entered Eretz Yisrael and infiltrated Eretz Yisrael. The story of Hanukkah, it wasn't a story between the Jewish people and the Greeks. It was between the very few religious Jewish people and the Greeks and all the Jews who joined the Greeks. A lot of Jews became Misyavnim. They became like the Greeks. They married Greek women. They married Greek men. Right? We know the story of Miriam Bal Spilga, who married a Greek general. So they married out. They converted out. And this infiltrated the Jewish people. It was a great time of assimilation. The few Jewish religious people were Matisyahu and his Chevra, and a few guys, and that's why. What was the calling of the Maccabees? What's Maccabee mean? What's the word Maccabee? It's an acronym for something. Mila Shemelai. Maccabee, but it was basically a calling. It was a calling for the Jew people who wanted to stay close to God to go fight. But the majority of the Jews were assimilated. So when the Hashmonaim won, what do you think is going to happen if something similar like that happened today? Not everyone all of a sudden drops what they're doing. Even Ezra, when he came to Eretz Yisrael, he had to tell everyone to get rid of their non-Jewish wives. The Jewish people in exile before the building of the Second Temple were also married to non-Jewish women. He says you got to get rid of them. And he also made them send away the children. So here comes the Hashmonaim, and again, so they wanted to make it more severe. So people shouldn't think, hey, what's the big deal? So I had a relationship with a non-Jewish woman. So they made it more severe to say, no, she's considered a nida, she's considered a woman who's impure, she's considered a woman who's a maidservant, a goya, she's considered a married woman, she's considered a prostitute, all that. Okay, so they wanted to make it more severe to root out this assimilation that was going on. Okay. Therefore, okay. Why? So because he says, Reb Dimi says that Reb Dimi maintains that even that they don't relieve their wives, so it's not considered like a zona. Hold on. All right. So therefore, Reb Dimi says that even a Gentile doesn't let his wife go out and have relations, and therefore they're considered married women, and therefore they added that even though they may be not the law of marrying a Gentile, but it has kind of a severity of taking someone else's wife. Okay. Reb Chizda says like this. We're going to learn a little more, and then we're going to drop. We'll go next week to try to finish the sugya of Pinchas. We'll learn a little bit of the story. Another 5 minutes. Reb Chizda says like this. Back to the case of the Talmud. What happens if a person finds someone having relations with a non-Jewish woman or a Gentile in public? So then, if you come to ask the rabbi, Moses, they're having relations. What do I do? We don't tell them, well, if you're, go kill them, because if you're asking questions, then you're not a zealot, basically. If you're not, and like again, Rashi says a zealot's not just a person who's a murderer. A zealot's not a person who's just trying to be a mafia. A zealot's a person who's zealot for God. You have to be very careful. If you're not doing it for God, and we're going to see that Pinchas had so many miracles to show he did it for God, you yourself could get killed. So, if a person comes to ask a question, we don't tell them, go kill the person. And Itmar Nam Yosland Amar Rabba Barachana Amar Rabbi Yochanan Rabba Barachana said name Rabbi Yochanan Abal Limlech Ein Martin Like. Someone who asks a question that we don't tell them that's what they should do. But and they added even more than that. Alashim Pirs Zimri. The classic case of a zealot that we have in the Torah is the case of Zimri. Zimri is who? Zimri is a prince of Israel. We're going to learn later that Zimri it's fascinating. Zimri, this is the end of the 40 years. The story happened in the 40 years. In the beginning of the 40 years, we're going to learn in a few weeks about the dedication of the tabernacle. One of the head of the tribe of Shimon, who is this prince that is representing his tribe in the tabernacle. He's not just a nobody. He's the person who's Zimri. Zimri has 7 names. And that's, let's say, that he's the guy, and he goes and he has relations in public in a horrible way in front of Moshe and the Jewish people with the Gentile woman. And so Pinchas comes and kills him. So the Gemara says now, She'im Pirish Zimri, if Zimri would have withdrawn from the act of intercourse, and then only then Pinchas would have killed him as a zealot, so to say, for what he did, not what he's doing. V'harbu Pinchas, Nergalov. They would take Pinchas to court, and Pinchas would be tried as a murderer. Nepech Zimri v'harga the Pinchas, and another thing the Gemara says, if while even Zimri's in the act, and he sees Pinchas is coming to kill him, he turns around and kills Pinchas to save himself, Zimri would not be punished for killing Pinchas. Why? Because Pinchas was a raidif. A raidif is the law. If someone's coming to kill you, you're allowed to kill him, right? If someone, it's called a raidif. So we learned this law before. If someone's chasing you to kill them, if you have a gun, you're allowed to do self-defense. There's a lot of laws about that. How you have to make sure that was the only way to protect yourself. But the point is that Zimri could have protected himself. Pinchas was a raidif. So the Gemara is telling us you have to be very careful. By being a zealot, if you don't do it right, you'll be tried as a murderer. 2, if Zimri protects himself and kills you, no one's going to do anything to Zimri. He's allowed to do that because you're being a zealot has nothing to do with Zimri. Like it says, okay. We're going to stop here. The next case is going to go in to tell us the whole story of what happened with Pinchas and Zimri, and what was the case. We're going to learn basically it's a fascinating case, a story of how Pinchas has to go and protect his zealot for God. It's not so simple. It's not so simple what he did. It's not so. He was very smart about it. He came to Moshe, asked Moshe. Moshe says, "I can't tell you what to do." But nevertheless, Pinchas went and did what he did. We all know the stories in the Torah. It's the beginning of the parsha of Pinchas, the end of the parsha of Chukas, and that's why he became a Kohen, for what he did for Hashem. Again, this is not a lesson for anyone to become a zealot. Please don't take it in the wrong way. The laws of a zealot are very complicated, but this is the story and this is the laws that the Mishnah is teaching us. Laila Tov, everyone. Thank you for joining.